Taking back your marriage isn't easy, is it? I've really been blessed by the hard work Pastor Bart has put into our last 2 weeks. He's been serving up huge platters of goodness that simply can't be argued with. Week 1, he challenged us to do the hard work, because many of us walk blissfully into relationships thinking, just like that Beatles song we've all heard growing up, all you need is love. The problem is, what popular music has taught us for the last 100 years or so isn't exactly true. What we've all been taught is that the rush of emotion that we get when attracted to someone, when that fun cocktail of dopamine and oxytocin that's triggered by dating someone we like, that feeling is love. That uncontrollable desire, that feeling that keeps you looking like Goofy with his jaw on the floor, that bizarre, I can't live without this person feeling that we all get, is love. The reality is, love takes work, ongoing work. Love is a decision, and that decision sustains love when chemicals subside. It's easy to forget about ourselves when we're full of love hormones. It's harder to act when those hormones have subsided, even though acting in love often brings those hormones back. So Bart challenged us. Do the hard work. Commit to loving unconditionally. Commit to keeping the promises that were so easy to make when you were being bossed around by those chemicals in your brain. And then last week, Bart brought us to the truth that many of us have never really thought about before. The truth is that marriage is unavoidably a 3-person job. Those 3 are a man, a woman, and God. And the soulmate that we should be seeking is God, not our spouse. Again, it's our culture that's lied to us. Barry White has lied to us. In that deep, sexy voice, he lied to us. Your spouse cannot be your first, your last, and your everything. You cannot be that for your husband, and you cannot be that for your wife. We all know this. It's nice and romantic to think about, but think about the pressure. Think about what it really means if another person makes you the center of their universe. All their happiness depends on you, that only you can satisfy them. Can you really deal with that? There was a movie that came out a few years ago, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel. That movie is called 500 Days of Summer. That Summer is a girl that Gordon-Levitt's character falls in love with. Now, here's a spoiler for you. She can't handle being his perfect woman. I won't ruin anything more about the movie except that it's the exact opposite of a romantic comedy. But she's right. None of us can handle it. There's only one being that can handle being our first, our last, and our everything. That's God. It's the way he made us. It's the way he designed marriage to work. When we seek our number 1 with our number 2, when we focus our lives around the mission of God with our spouse as our partner,
then it all begins to make sense. It all begins to work out. That pizza analogy was the best thing I ever heard to explain it. Did you guys like that pizza analogy? You guys enjoy that pizza? I know he handed out about 5 or 6 of them. Tomato sauce and cheese are nothing but slop when you stick them together, until they're laid on a foundation of bread. It's the dough that gives everything shape, that allows the 2 substances to layer themselves out in the right way, that the textures work together. It's what organizes the sauce and the cheese into something that becomes amazing when other ingredients are added on top. But it's nothing but slop if you don't lay it on the dough. Honestly, I look around and I see this reality denied amongst many people, even who grew up in the church. We just don't get that God has to be a foundation for us to truly love our spouses fairly and in ways that make marriage sustainable and the joy it was designed to be. So don't underestimate this. But this week we're going to talk about something different. We're talking about fighting. No, not MMA style, and not pillow fighting. Both of these are extremes. We all wish the only fights that we had in our marriages were pillow fights, but most of us don't step into the octagon with each other either, so that's a good thing. Every relationship has disagreements. It's inevitable, mostly because of some basic factors, like the fact that we weren't raised in the same home. Although if you ever saw my brother and I get together in a confined space for more than half an hour, you would know that growing up in the same house is not an indicator of peace. But like the fact that we're built differently. No, really, guess what? Men and women are actually different. We're built different physically. We have different hormones that affect us at different times. We think differently. Did you know that? Seriously, you can think about the same object. Say a fish. Say you got a fish. To a guy, he's thinking about that fish. Whoa, that's a nice fish. Ooh, that's a big one. Bet you had to be tough to fight that monster. That's what a guy's thinking. Now, when a girl catches a fish, just like it, it's, look at the beautiful coloration of the scales. What a gorgeous fish. Oh, so shiny and supple in the water. So beautiful. You think I'm making this up? I actually watched a women's fishing TV show, and that's exactly what they were saying when they'd catch. The same fishes I'd seen some other guy catch. So it shouldn't surprise us that fights are going to happen. Let's get into it. What do couples fight about? Well, according to MSN Lifestyle, the number 10 thing we fight about is the toilet paper roll. Either you put it on this way or you put it on that way. So quick survey. Who's a paper over the top person here? There you go. Who's a paper underneath person? It's split, you know. People have different ways of doing it. And it causes fights, believe it or not. Number 9, the fight over the remote. Who gets to choose the program? More than one household settles this with multiple TVs. In our house, we settled it with laptops. Number 8, vacation planning. Kids or no kids, family or no family, friends or no friends, or which friends? A relaxing vacation or adventure vacation? Number 7, the me time fight. When is it girls' night anyways? Guys get their hockey night in Canada night and their Monday night football night and weeks of playoffs throughout the year. You get the hunting trips and the fishing trips and the list goes on. Do you go tit for tat or do you cut it back a little bit to even it out? Does she head off to Great Falls or Calgary for shopping trips with her pals? It's a fight. Number 6 is family fights. Is Christmas at her parents' place or your parents' place? What about Thanksgiving? What about reunions? What about Cousin Eddie's birthday or Uncle Joe's retirement party? We can't not show up. I love my family. What's wrong with you that you can't see that? When you married me, you married my family, didn't you? Was that in our vows? I don't recall that being in our vows. I missed that. Number 5, religion and tradition. We need to get married in this church because all my brothers and sisters and my parents got married there. Easter's a big deal for me. For others, it's a long weekend. What about Hanukkah? What about Yom Kippur? Maybe not so much around here, but my uncle, he married a Chinese girl, so, Chinese New Year comes into play. Another cousin of mine married a Muslim man, so now she has to worry about Ramadan and Eid and halal cooking, or does she? Who has to sacrifice their beliefs to make it work? A lot of couples simply stop practicing their faiths initially because they don't want to spoil anything. But in many, if not most of these cases, strongly held beliefs prior to marriage are going to come back at some point in some form. And that's when the fight begins. Number 4 is about work. Who stays home? Who works? Who brings home the bacon? Or another twist, you're working too much. You're never around. You're a workaholic. What's most important to you anyways? Why can't you see I'm doing this for you? You know how I know all about all these fights? I've had them. But number 3, it's about the kids. How to raise them. Too many clothes or too few? Too many toys or too few? Are we spoiling them or not disciplining them enough? Should we have 1 or 8? To spank or not to spank? To yell or not to yell? You're too nice. No, you're too mean. And then number 2, we all knew it was coming, the sex fight. You knew it had to be on there. Do you think I'm unattractive? Why do you always have a headache? You're just Randy McGoat all the time. You're a cold fish. Sex is a bone of contention with a lot of us. And I won't downplay it, but it isn't the most important thing in marriage, but God thinks it's pretty important. Important enough that he actually left some pretty pointed instructions in the Bible about it. But we're going to get into that in a few weeks when we do our Bow Chicka Wow Wow week. So just hold on. Number 1 is the money fight. You're always shopping and blowing my money. You just bought a what? Why aren't we saving? What do you mean the credit card's maxed? This too, God has some opinions on, and we're going to be tackling that during our week on money, so hold on. In the meantime, we're going to deal with fighting. What is the common denominator in all these fights? Well, the common denominator is, I'm right and you're wrong. I want my way. That's what all these fights come down to. I want the toilet paper my way. I want to watch my show. I want my dream vacation. I want time with my friends. I want to hang out with my family. I want my religion. I want to find my value in my work outside the home. I want to parent my way. I want sex on my terms. I want to spend money the way I think is best. I hear this all the time from my kids, only when they do it, to help them understand what they're actually saying to me, I usually reply with, I want, I want, I want. It may not be the best response, but at least they get a little bit of realization when they're being selfish. Funny thing, though, I don't have anyone to do that to me when I'm acting that way towards my wife. So, anyways, so this list of fight subjects are all true. There are many others that we could probably add to it as well, because the truth is that we are selfish, sinful people. That's who we are. And getting married doesn't make us suddenly perfect, does it? In fact, getting married is like giving someone special permission to see all of your sinful, selfish behavior, isn't it? If anything, we're more likely to fight with our spouse than pretty much anyone else in our lives. So if there's no way to avoid a fight, if it's really going to happen sooner or later, what do we have to do? Learn how to run away from a fight? Yeah, that works. Yeah, just ignore it and it'll all go away. You know what the Bible says about that approach? Check this out. A continual dripping on a rainy day and a quarrelsome wife are both alike. Avoiding an issue is like waterboarding. I'm not going to sign up for lifelong torture, thanks. Not my ballgame. So then what? Take up boxing? I don't know if dishing out physical pain will help the emotional pain that we'll get from an argument with our spouse. But that kind of relates to our answer. We need to learn how to fight. Not how to beat the other into submission or to twist their words into making them agree with us. But we need to learn how to fight fair. How to be able to disagree, to get to the heart of the issue, to bring about some kind of resolution that doesn't result in permanent damage. Since everyone is going to fight sooner or later, then we need to find the difference between healthy couples and unhealthy couples. I'd suggest there's one big difference. Unhealthy couples fight dirty. No holds barred. Break out the big guns. Bring the pain until the other person can't defend themselves anymore. To fall back on the MMA analogy, they go for the submission hold. They look for the tap out. Healthy couples, on the other hand, they fight fair. They aren't out for a crippling move. This leads us to the second big difference. Healthy couples are looking to restore the relationship, to get on the same page. Unhealthy couples are fighting to win. And if you're looking to win, you're looking to make your spouse lose, aren't you? Tell me, do you think it's easier or harder to love somebody after you've just lost the argument? Say you're arguing, and in the process, you discover that you really are in the wrong. Now, I'm going to pretend that you're already light years ahead of me in maturity and can somehow admit to yourself that you actually have been wrong and that you won't try and change the subject or shift the blame to the other person. So you've realized that you're wrong and you admit it. Great. You've lost the argument. Your spouse won. Do you feel more connected or less? Do you resent maybe a little bit the spouse that pushed so hard to win, even though they were right? Do you perhaps feel like they may have been right, but the cost was too high? There's a word for this, and it comes from ancient Greece. It's called a Pyrrhic victory. It comes from a war that was fought between King Pyrrhus of Greece and the Romans. In his first fight, he won, but the cost in lives was so high that he famously remarked, "One more such victory over the Romans, and we are undone." He had overseen the Battle of Asculum, and he knew that if he had to pay such a high price for victory, he was going to lose this war. To us in marriage, we need to ask ourselves, is the price of winning the fight worth the cost of winning the fight? But there is hope. The book of James gives us a verse that we're going to talk about for a little while. We're going to come back to over and over again here. The verse from James is James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be slow or be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. James wasn't speaking specifically about marriage here. But as I said a few minutes ago, there are few relationships more prone to fighting than marriage. So when James speaks to taking these steps towards healthy communication, they need to be taken very seriously. So let's break this passage down. Let every person be quick to hear or quick to listen. We need to get on this. It doesn't just have to do with shutting our mouths and letting the other person express what they have to say, but it needs to be understood. They need to be able to say what they need to say, but you need to be able to hear what they're actually saying. What is your spouse saying, and why are they saying it? I need to go hang out with the guys tonight, maybe expressing a need. And if you have kids, then you've probably been working with them since they got home from school, cleaning up after them all day while they've been at school, and you're probably thinking, hey, I'm the one who needs the break. Of course, knowing most guys, they won't have actually explained why they need to be taking off and dropping that bomb on their wives. So it's usually a good idea to dig deeper. What made his day so rough that he thinks he needs a break? Not making excuses here, but this also goes the other way too. Something I first heard when I was My wife and I were in a marriage preparation class way back, I guess, 14 years ago now, with a pastor. I recently actually had cause to revisit this because we've been counseling a couple of other people towards marriage, so it's great. This term is called active listening. What this means is that when someone says something to you, especially something that you might take the wrong way, what you want to do is you want to rephrase it and then say it back to them. So my wife says to me, my head is killing me, I'm going to bed early. Now I'm feeling a little bit inside like, hey, you're leaving me to clean up dinner, keep the kids occupied and quiet, and then put them all to bed? That's what I'm thinking. But the smart thing to do is to say, hey, I'm sorry, headaches do suck. Do you want some peace and quiet? Is that what you're looking for? Part of that clarifies what she's really saying. And then continuing that conversation gives more of a chance for her to explain why she said it, without the harshness of, well, poor you, my days suck too, so thanks for dumping it all on me. The other part of the active listening is being able to say what you're feeling without slamming the other person. So avoid the you always and you never type statements. And here's a tough one for you guys. Try actually talking about your feelings. For example, when you go to bed early complaining of a headache, I kind of feel a little bit of abandoned. Could be something you could say instead of just saying, oh man, you're always going to bed early. Not so accusatory or sarcastic. And it actually gives you a chance to continue the conversation without offense. But saying things, sometimes even true things, in the wrong way leads us down to some pretty awful paths in marriage. There's a really solid book that addresses the reality by describing something called the crazy cycle. I'm going to get to it in a second, but first I'm going to take out another Bible verse that speaks directly to what often causes conflict in marriages. Let's take a look at Ephesians 5:33. It says, however, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Now, this verse is nestled right in the middle of a passage about marriage and how wives and husbands are supposed to relate to one another. And then you have this. This verse calls for husbands to love their wives the way they love and care for their own selves. At the same time, it calls wives to respect their husbands. But why aren't both of them called to love one another? Why aren't they both called to respect one another? Emerson and Sarah Eggerichs, in their book Love and Respect, contend that it's because these are the two things that men and women respectively are not very good at in general. Most men work on a respect basis. That's how we operate. We respect one another. We respect the other guys. And that helps us get along and get things done. Our natural tendency is to respect our wives, to treat them like one of the guys, to assume that she's okay unless she says otherwise, and to mind his own business generally. What men find harder to do is to love their wives, to be tender with them, to set her needs before his own, to make her concerns and her situation of primary importance in his plans. Vice versa, women generally live in a world of emotions. Girls love their friends, they love their kids, they're generally really good at setting aside their own needs for their kids and stuff like that. Women generally get how to love their husbands. But what they often fail to recognize is that men need to be respected. They need to be viewed as strong, competent, good decision makers, leaders. They need to be trusted. Women can love their men but not trust them, and not let them lead, and not believe that they as husband really have their wives' best interests at heart. So these are the Eggerichs assumptions drawn from Ephesians 5:33. But is it true? Well, they did some surveying to back it up, and they asked 7,000 people this question. When you are in conflict with your spouse or significant other, do you feel unloved or disrespected? 83% of men said they felt disrespected, when 72% of women said they felt unloved. Now, it doesn't make it universal, but in general, this is true about how we relate to one another. So now that I've explained the men's need for respect and women's need for love, I'm going to go back and explain the crazy cycle. It works like this. It can start with either person, but let's just say it starts with something a wife says. We're always broke. We never have enough money. Husband hears this like a shot, like he isn't earning enough. So he just felt disrespected. So he turns around and says, well, maybe I should just quit buying you flowers then, since you think I waste all our money. Now she feels unloved. And of course, that sets her off. So she comes back with a, Ha! The last time you bought me flowers was 1995. I should have known you'd just pass the buck. Now he feels accused and not taking responsibility. So something that again slashes at his respect level. So he comes back with, well, it's not like you to give two figs about me anyway. All I ever see from you is your flannel PJs in the back cover of the latest Harlequin book. So it goes back and forth. She feels ugly and unloved again. The crazy cycle just goes around and around, sucking the life out of everybody, dragging a once loving marriage, kicking and screaming into divorce. The Agarics teach that we need to break these crazy cycles. We need to recognize them for what they are and then make conscious choices to break them up with our actions and words that speak the opposite. So going back to our most recent example there, when she brings up the money situation, he needs to hear that what she really fears is he doesn't love her enough to provide for them both. He needs to take steps to reassure her that he loves her and he is open to doing things differently to help her meet her needs. But let's take it one step deeper and pretend that she's the one who catches the backlash. She just heard him make the flowers threat. Now, she suddenly recognizes that he's really feeling bashed by her remark about finances. And so she needs to bring a positive respect level. Something like, hey, I know you're doing your best. I just think we need to sit down and do some brainstorming together to see if we can figure out a way to save a little more money. Now, I'm not going to pretend that one positive remark is going to suddenly turn bad feelings around. It doesn't always work that way. I do believe there is such a thing as emotional momentum, and it does take work. In fact, it's sometimes very hard to set aside your own hurts in a fight like this and choose to speak positively about the other person. But the thing is, someone has got to do it. Or else you just keep riding that crazy cycle right out to the lawyer's office. So now let's return to James. His second recommendation is that we need to not only be quick to listen, but slow to speak. Don't let our mouths say things that we're going to regret. Think hard about what you want to say in response to things. And don't let emotions feed you into the crazy cycle. Sometimes our instinct is to go on the defense, to deflect, to change the subject, to make it about something else that you know isn't your fault. Other times we'll recall that old adage, the best defense is a good offense, and then start offending. Nestled in the concept of being slow to speak, I really believe is figuring out some solid ground rules for any argument. We're going to give you our recommendations, but you can feel free to add your own to this list. These rules are not in priority sequence, but they're all, I would say, equally important. First rule I got for you, don't yell. Just don't. Don't make the fight public. It's between the two of you. Let it stay there as long as possible. I know just how hard it is to follow this rule because it seems that many of us come from kind of two different types of families, either the old yeller type family or the silent but deadly family. I come from the old yeller family. My family yells about everything. Excitement, laughter, anger, jealousy. Yelling is a sign of either a really good time or a really bad time. My wife's family is the opposite. In fact, in their family, you don't hear anything about something that's wrong until you hear it secondhand from somebody else through the grapevine. And so-and-so is really mad about X, the silent killers that sneaks up on you. It's hard to unlearn what you've grown up in, but both of us have actually had to do that. We've had to figure out how to leave behind bad patterns of communication from both of our families and find our own way. Yelling is one of them. So like I said, the neighbors don't need to hear. The kids don't need to hear. Keep it between the two of you. Second one, don't call names. I don't need to tell you why. You already know. I think this is more habit than anything else. We all love to label, especially things that annoy us. But make this a rule that you stand by. You won't call your spouse names. Fights don't have to be that personal. They need to be about the issue, not the person. Another one, don't bring up the past. You've heard it before, don't beat a dead horse, and so on. This often happens because we really haven't truly let go of past hurts. There hasn't been maybe a full process of forgiveness yet. Sometimes you actually have gone through a process of forgiveness, or you thought you had, and it's especially those ones that we need to let go of. If you have already said that you've forgiven someone for something, you need to let it go. Next one, take a time out. Be willing to say, we're not getting anywhere. Let's cool off and try this again and pick another time. Set a time to revisit it. But this is actually a mistake that I've made more than once. Trying to take a break from an argument that's getting nowhere without setting a return date almost always gets translated by the other person as, you're not taking this seriously. And that just escalates things. So be willing to take a time out and then set a time in date. I mentioned this one before, and it's worth saying again. You never say you never, and always avoid saying you always. Generalizations are unfair, even if there is a pattern. Part of loving your spouse is choosing to think the best of them. They do sometimes do things right? Sometimes. Next rule, never threaten to leave or divorce. This is something that has never been on the table, on the radar, or even kept as a contingency for us. It's not an option. Contracts have outs and escape clauses, but you're not in a contract. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. But beyond that, you're never going to be able to make a relationship work if it is, even at the back of your mind, disposable. We live in a disposable world. We're surrounded by objects that were built with planned obsolescence in mind. This is not your starter spouse that you're sitting next to right now. We don't wear out. It's never cheaper to just trade them in for an upgrade. There is no such thing as a clean divorce. You will bear scars for the rest of your life, and people completely undeserving will bear them as well. Your kids, your extended family. And last rule I'm going to give you, never compare your spouse to somebody else. So-and-so's wife would never do that to him. Want to bet? Don't compare. The truth is, you don't know people half as well as you think you do. Sometimes even the most perfect relationships on the outside mask deep pain and hurt on the inside. But beyond that, it just never results in anything good. The best golfer in the world will gain nothing by comparing himself and staring at everyone else play. The only one he can affect, the only one whose variables he can change, are his own. So if he's setting himself up, it's the smoothness of his swing, it's the stance, it's his knees, it's his shoulders, it's everything else. He has to worry about himself in order to make that perfect swing. If he worries about anyone else, he's not going anywhere. I firmly believe that this is also the only road to repairing a marriage, by taking responsibility for yourself and working on yourself first. The last piece of James' advice is something that I think we've all heard many times before, and that is be slow to anger. This theme is actually something that you find throughout the Bible. We're called to be like God, to be slow to anger. And he really is. He waits years and years for people to turn to him. We live in a time right now where God could really bring about the end at any time. But he doesn't, because he wants to just give a few more people a chance to come and join his family. He waited for Israel to return to him for decades, even centuries. He waited before issuing judgments to many nations, sometimes for hundreds of years, giving them time to turn from the awful things that they were doing. So too, we need to be slow to anger. One thing that's true is that it always is easier to be angry at someone you don't know that well. It's easy to get filled with rage when we're cut off in traffic, isn't it? We know nothing about the other driver. We don't know what kind of day he's been having. We don't know why they're in such a rush in the first place. We don't know. All we know is that we're just really ticked off by them. I heard a story once about a guy on the subway who watched as this man got on the subway train with 3 kids. The kids were out of control. They were jumping, they were yelling, they were getting in people's way. The apparent father was making half-hearted gestures to try and get them to stop and behave, but it seemed like he really didn't care that much. Everyone on the car was just getting enraged with this guy and his kids. Then somehow in a quieter moment, the first guy, he had a chance to say something to him. He just kind of let out a little rough day, eh? And the guy just spilled his guts. It turned out that his wife had just died in the hospital, and he was returning from the hospital with his kids. And they really didn't understand what was going on. And they were acting out because they just had no idea how to deal with their feelings. He could hardly even think, let alone manage his kids. He was so sick with grief. When this spread around the train, all of a sudden people were stepping up in amazing ways, calming the kids down, and all the anger went away over their frustration and their interruption. When we seek to really understand our spouses, anger never really gets that strong a foothold. I'm not saying we're not going to get angry, but the more you can stay on the same page, the more communication that happens, the more you understand about what's going on with each other and why you're doing what you're doing, then the harder it is to be really angry about it. Here's a spiritual thought for you. It's much harder to fight with your spouse when you're praying for each other, or even better, praying together. Those things that are hurting you can be talked about, and brought to God. And often conversations are a much less confrontational tone when you're both seeking after God for help with these things. There is no way to avoid all fights that are going to come to you in marriage. But in between, you can also be about building up your account to celebrate the good times, the good moments, the kindness and the care. If your relationship seems like fight after fight, then and each one is going to get heavier and harder to deal with than the last. But if you're intent upon enjoying the times in between the fights, then the fights themselves will never drag you too low. You'll be able to tell yourself, last week was a good week. Next week could very well be a good week too. And you give yourself and your spouse hope. Hope is in really short supply these days. It's precious. But yet that is what Christ really brings the most to us, is hope. Hope that broken marriages can be restored. Hope that dead love can be revived. Hope that even though last week was bad, next week can still be good. Hope that things can change, that we don't have to get stuck in the same patterns of destruction. I hope that this hope is something that you can grasp, that you can feel, that you can carry away from this morning, from this whole series even. Even if your marriage is okay, I want you to have hope that it can be better. Even if your marriage is good, I want you to have hope that God can make a great marriage for you. A life-giving marriage. A marriage that glows and shines with hope beyond you and into the people that you live with, that you work with, that you're related to. I believe in marriage. I have hope for marriage. I have hope that my marriage to Cheryl can be better than it is. I have hope that it will last us for a lifetime, despite all the statistics that we've talked about. Why do I have that hope? In part because of God's word and God's promises, because I know that God is a fan of marriage. He created it. But the other part is something a little rarer that I have that gives me hope for marriage. And that is my extended family. Why does it give me hope? Let me tell you. My grandparents on my dad's side had 5 kids, 4 boys and a girl. My grandparents are still alive and still married. 67 years now. All of their 5 children got married. And all 5 of them are still married to their first spouse. And of them, they had, between them, there have been 13 grandchildren of my grandparents, including myself. All of my cousins now are over 18, and about half of us are married. And of those people, of my cousins who have gotten married, not a single divorce. Now, I'm not going to point and say that this is because of the fact that they're all followers of Jesus, because they're not. The truth is, I'm pretty much the only one in my extended family who even goes to church on a monthly basis, let alone a weekly basis. So it's not that. It's the power, though, of hope. Despite not having the crust under their tomato sauce and cheese, they all believe in marriage. They believe it can work. They hope that they can go the distance, and it's not an empty hope for them. They have seen it unfold in their parents' marriage, their grandparents' marriage, their aunts and uncles' marriages, their cousins' marriages. We have all heard the stats, but we have hope because the people we know best have done it and are continuing to do it. With the power of God in your marriage and the power of hope in your marriage, who is to say what God can't save, preserve, or even bless your marriage? No matter how bad your fight is today, God can heal it. So have hope. So now my challenge to you is this, because we've got to have a challenge. Take this time, take this week to get on the same side with your significant other. If you're still not sure about this whole God thing, then start with this. Just sit down and talk. Share what your spouse or significant other does that blesses you, that just encourages you, that makes you feel good. What gives you joy? What gives you peace? What gives you contentment? Whatever. Let that be the beginning of building on the good times for the two of you. If you're up for a greater challenge, you're going to grab this one. Determined to fight on the same side. Determined to recognize the challenges that you face as a couple and set your mind to fighting them together as a team. Take some time maybe to brainstorm about those challenges after you do the first challenge, of course. First, you list how your wife blesses you or your husband blesses you. Then set your minds and intentions to facing those challenges together, not letting them split you apart. When Tim and Megan got married, they asked that this verse be shared with their guests. It's from Ecclesiastes. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. If they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another man to lift him up. Or woman. Again, if 2 lie together, they can keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against the one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken. All the trials, all the hardships, all the arguments that you have had or will have in your relationship will be decided upon whether you are facing a challenge united or divided. If you're united, you will be able to lift each other up, sometimes even physically. If you are cold, then you will warm one another. If you are attacked by someone, then 2 will prevail. But the most important thought I leave you with, that Solomon left us with, is this, that a threefold cord is stronger still. Unite your life to your spouse and to God, and you will have something that's almost unbreakable. Let's pray. Lord God, I just thank you for marriage, and I thank you for the power that you've nestled into this state, this covenant that you've encouraged us to move into. God, we're amazed at how much you can do when we are united to each other and united to you. And God, I think about all the different things that we can think about that might strengthen our marriages, that might help us navigate through fights and all these other concerns. But the biggest one that we can have is to just allow you to be a part of the conversation, Lord. So God, I just pray for each of these couples that are here. I pray for each person that is here that is not in a relationship, that they would be able to take seriously this time of preparation, that would give them the tools to be able to have a healthy relationship when they do. But in the meantime, God, we just look to you for guidance, for strength, for encouragement, for wisdom. And I just pray, Lord, that all the different things that we've considered today, Lord, would be an encouragement, that would be something that would help each one of us to draw closer to our loved ones and draw closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.